Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoteric and our continuing series on the Steam Deck, more importantly what emulators you should be playing and the games you should be playing on those emulators. And today we're going to be doing Super Nintendo, and it's probably going to be a very weird recommendation list because there's only going to be a few common games on this, otherwise it's going to be the esoteric weird stuff that I love to play. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe, that notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, you got a Patreon link down below as well. And if you do need a tutorial on getting Super Nintendo on your Steam Deck, I've got one on the playlist. But jumping right off the top, not the most uncommon game around, but one that I never hear anybody talk about, and it breaks my heart. That is going to be Demon's Crest. This is an absolutely spectacular game that does not get anywhere near the credit it deserves. It is part of the Ghouls and Ghosts franchise from Capcom, but it plays way more like a Metroidvania game. This is like Metroid except with a horror theme and made by Capcom, not Nintendo. But this is one of my absolute favorite all-time Super Nintendo games. I own an original copy on both the Super Nintendo and the Famicom system as well, and it is just spectacular. The graphics, the soundtrack, the colorways, everything goes into that light horror theme. And it is just that good. Firebrand here as a main character, absolutely love it. And if you like those Metroidvania style games and you've played Super Metroid and you're looking for something like it, you can do no better than Demon's Crest in my opinion. This game is long, it's complex, you have to find certain items in certain areas to progress through it. It has everything you want out of a Super Nintendo game. And like I said, it's just not one that people mention near as often as I would like. You start off relatively linear, but once you get into the open world map in Mode 7, you can go to pretty much any area in the game you want, but you will find that some areas are inaccessible until you get certain power-ups, exactly like in Metroid or something like Symphony of the Night. And I do appreciate that. And I also love the added little bonus of the flying mechanics. You can hover in air, you can attack, and the game has a ton of verticality to it as well, giving you that ability to fly, hover, and scale the screen in real time. But it's just such a fun game, and it's one that no one really talks about, which definitely confuses me because when I think of the Super Nintendo, this is one of the first games I think of on that list. Now, of course, it is part of the Ghouls and Ghosts franchise, and I highly recommend you check out the Super Nintendo entry in that as well. But just be forewarned, it is difficult as all hell. But on the games that you've probably never heard of before, it's going to be Gourmet Sentai Barayaru. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but it is a very difficult pronunciation for me as a non-native Japanese speaker. But this is absolutely a ridiculous beat 'em up that has this hook where you need to collect food throughout the stages and use that to cook recipes in between levels to get your health back. You need a full mastery of the cooking or else you're not going to get enough health to continue, but it is a very weird and strange game, and that means you know I absolutely love it. It's also a really competent beat 'em up, definitely B tier, but what elevates this game so much is just the complete absurd nature of it, because you're going to see I'm able to hit enemies facing the other direction. This game definitely has some jank, but I just absolutely love what it does. And that cooking mechanic in between levels is a ton of fun as well. And honestly, both in the soundtrack and visual department, this is no slouch whatsoever. The soundtrack is amazing. I'll let you listen in a little bit. And this is one of those games that I never hear anybody talk about, even though it did get an English digital re-release in like 2019 or so, which really did surprise me. But again, if you have access to the Super Nintendo and Super Famicom library on your Steam Deck and you're looking for something new to play, definitely check this out. It is just so much fun. It's quirky, it's weird, it's strange, but it is a really good game and it's going to hook you in. You'll play for like 5 or 10 minutes, or lose a few lives, and then realize you really want to see what's going to happen next. And that's the best thing about a game. It makes you come back and want to see more. But like I said, it's just such an odd game. I can't understand why they made it, but I love that they did, and the soundtrack for it is absolutely incredible. So go ahead and listen for like 30 seconds and I'll be right back. It's weird, it's quirky, and I love it for all those reasons. But speaking of games I love and wish more people would play, it's going to be The Fireman from Human Entertainment. Leave me a comment down below and tell me if you've ever heard of this one. It is a firefighting game for the Super Nintendo that starts out relatively easy, but in later levels it really gets complex with the time management, and being from Human Entertainment, it definitely has its own charm and flair. I almost recommended both Clock Tower as well as Septentrion on this playlist, but I decided that the Fireman would be an easier thing to start with because both of those games are very deep cuts and esoteric in their gameplay. But this game is just so much fun. You have to navigate a level, search out the victims of the fire while fighting the fire itself, and manage the time, because you will see there's a timer in the upper left hand corner and you need to worry about that. You're going to get a level map in the middle of the screen, but having to figure out how to navigate around the map in and of itself is going to be its own challenge. You see where you need to go, you see what's going on, but getting there is half the battle. The other half of the battle being actively fighting fire while you were doing it. But this game just feels so special and so unique. That's why I want to recommend it on a list like this if you are looking for new games to play on your Steam Deck and the Super Nintendo emulator. There's such a complex and deep library on this system that games like The Fireman totally get forgotten about. Because this video is not the top 10 of all time list that you could just Google. These are the things that I think people really should experience when they check out deep cuts on the Super Nintendo. But The Fireman is just one of those games. It's unique to itself. I can't think of anything else on the Super Nintendo that's quite like this, but if you can, leave me a comment down below and tell me, because I would be curious. But you can see here we have rescued the first victim of the fire. Level 1, very easy, but as you get further into this game, that timer is going to become tight, the level architecture is going to become more difficult, and it really is going to give you a ton of challenge that I think you're 100% going to love. Now, speaking of Japanese games that have been translated into English actually, Ganbar Goemon, The Strange General McGinnis, or Gunbei Goemon 2, is a spectacular side-scrolling game. The first game in the series came out in the US, but after that it was Japanese exclusive. And I love all these Goemon games. They just make me happy. They're bright, they're colorful. The combat is great as well, because for every Super Mario World or Yoshi's Island, there's a game like this that probably not a ton of people have played, or maybe you didn't even realize had been translated, because what other game is it going to let you ride on a mechanical koi that is literally a fish out of water in control when you are on land, but the minute you get into water, it starts zipping around and has incredible action. And this game does change itself up too. It starts as something like a 2D side-scroller, then it becomes more of a beat-em-up. It gives you so much diversity in the gameplay. But again, just like the last example, amazing soundtrack. Listen for 30 seconds, and I'll be right back. I'm not saying that's the theme to Batman, but I'm pretty sure it's a theme to Batman, and leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think. But moving on to the Great Battle 3, this definitely lies in the B tier category for beat 'em up hack and slash games on the Super Nintendo, but again it's one that I absolutely love, because I love things that are in the B tier, games that you're not used to hearing about. Because if you are looking for one of the best beat 'em ups of all time on the Super Nintendo, you're going to go right to Final Fight. But once you're done with something like that and you want another game in the genre to play, you definitely want to check this one out. I love the art style and all the characters being super deformed, and the Earth Golem there just melting down into mud as you strike him. And because it is a two-player game, you can have a ton of fun with friends as well. And that's why I recommend this game so much. It's got charm, it's got personality, it's got a great soundtrack, it's a multiplayer game. And again, I'm assuming it's one you've never heard of, because it doesn't show up on any lists of best import-only Super Nintendo games, but it does have a full English translation, which is absolutely spectacular. You don't need to worry about missing any of the story. But again, as we move on, sure, the background's not the most picturesque thing in the world, but I just love this character here. Dagunia is just basically a werewolf covered in bandages and armor. I don't know where they come up with this stuff, but I absolutely love watching it in motion, and I absolutely love playing it. Again, because you can emulate this on your Steam Deck, you can learn so many new experiences. Like this boss here coming out with what I assume is just a carrot peeler that also happens to shoot bullets. Don't know what's going on whatsoever, but I just love it. The game is so charming and so unique, and I'm assuming one that most people have not heard of. That's why I put it on a list like this. learn something new, play something fun, check it out, and maybe you'll fall in love with the game, and it might be your new favorite game to recommend with friends. And like I said earlier, because it is a 2-player game, bring a friend, grab some beers, it's going to be that much more fun. And it does have very light role-playing game elements to it as well. There's a shop where you can use that gold you've been picking up to get new power-ups or other potions that are going to aid you on your quest. But again, it's just one of those games. I don't feel like anyone's heard of it, and I really wish way more people would play it. Now on the opposite end of the spectrum, games that everyone's heard of and no one seems to think you should play is Dracula X on the Super Nintendo. Of course, Super Castlevania 4 is going to be the better of the 2 games to recommend, but that would be the easy one, because I think Dracula X does a lot more right than it does wrong. That's not to say the game isn't without its faults, it definitely has them, but I think it gets unfairly compared to Rondo of Blood as a pseudo-remake, and of course Rondo's going to be better 7 days out of the week than Dracula X, but the graphics are great, the gameplay is fun, and again, it's got one of the best soundtracks on the Super Nintendo in my opinion. So go ahead and listen for 30 seconds, I'll come back and try to convince you more about why you should play Dracula X, because it's not as bad as you've heard. I mean, as far as soundtracks go, you can't do much better than that, and honestly, Dracula X is a fun game. It does not review well online, it didn't review well back in the day, and I understand those complaints with it. What I'm here to say is just pop it on your Steam Deck and give it a shot. Play for 20-30 minutes, maybe you'll fall in love, maybe you'll hate it, but you're not really going to lose much by trying. And that's what I'm always trying to get people to do with this game. Just give it a try, see if you like it, because like I said, it definitely has some faults, but it's not without its merit. I feel like so many people write this game off as a cheap imitation to Rondo of Blood when it has so much more going on for it. So definitely load it up, give it a shot, and I think you're really going to like it. Fair warning though, it definitely 100% has the cheapest Dracula boss battle in the history of Castlevania, and you're going to be very frustrated by it. But I still think it's worth your time, so definitely check it out. Leave me a comment down below and tell me if you played it, what do you think? Now moving on to another fun game, Sunset Riders here, just an absolute blast of a run and gun Konami arcade board conversion. This is a fun game, it's super simple, you can do 1 or 2 player, it's mindless fun, but it's the best type of mindless fun. Run to the right, shoot your enemies, avoid the bullets, and sometimes avoid bulls stampeding towards you. It's one of those games that's immediate pick up and play, which makes it perfect for the Steam Deck. You could play a level or 2 on your train ride to work on your way downtown, and then just turn it off and decide to play again on the way back. I definitely don't think it's the prettiest game on the Super Nintendo. Some of the colors, Konami love using these pastels, and they usually work, but here, maybe not so much. But don't worry about how it looks. The gameplay is spectacular. It is just one of those games, you think you're going to play it for 5 minutes and you get stuck playing it for an hour or so because you just want to keep trying the same level over and over again. Because it does have a very stringent continue system. If you die at the boss, you can continue for sure, but you're going to go back right to where you started the level from. So you're just going to get addicted to that entire gameplay loop. You're going to see the boss, you're going to understand the patterns, but you're going to get hit 1 or 2 many times, and you're going to have to take a continue. So looping back around, learning everything that's going on, understanding what the game's asking of you, and just getting better and dodging those bullets is a ton of fun. So definitely if you never played Sunset Riders before, 10 out of 10 recommend, you need to check it out. Now on the same platforming aspect, but nothing like a Western, we're going to have Magical Poppin'. This is an absolutely spectacular Japanese exclusive, side-scrolling, kind of platform game that's going to have some light Metroidvania elements as well, but I love the graphics of this game, again with the super deformed sprites, just has a total charm to it. As we get into the gameplay, it is just a ton of fun, and I love how fast this game does its scrolling as well. It's definitely not going to be the same speed as something like Super Mario World. This is going to be moving fast the entire time, and it's a relatively quote-unquote open world as well. Each level is going to be maze-like, and you need to understand how to navigate around to get the next thing you need. But one of my favorite parts of this game is the soundtrack, because it's got such a charming quality to it. So go ahead and listen for 30 seconds, and I'll come back and tell you more why you need to play this game. You wouldn't expect a game like this to have a rock soundtrack, but at least in parts it does. But you'll see there we have some walls that we cannot get past right now, and that's the great thing about this game. You pick it up, you play it, you start seeing things you can't get to, and you start wondering how you actually get there in the first place. Sometimes it's really easy, just walk into a room and get a power-up, but as you get later into the game, some of these aspects are going to be a lot more difficult. You're going to have to figure out which direction you need to go, and that's what I love about this game so much. It has longevity, it has depth, and it's definitely one that I don't ever hear anyone mention. Now on the very famous Super Nintendo roster, because I gotta put a few in here, I'm gonna go with ActRaiser. I love this game. It's got a similar vibe to Magical Poppin'. It's just one of those games. It is quintessentially Super Nintendo, so much so there was a Nickelodeon show back in the day where kids would have to compete on arcade cabinets for high scores, and ActRaiser was almost always on that show, and I can't remember the name of it. Leave me a comment down below if you can. It's just this memory I have in the back of my head of seeing ActRaiser on Nickelodeon. But it is an awesome 2D side-scrolling hack-and-slash game. Has some Roston vibes to it. Now I do think Roston is better, but that's not on the Super Nintendo, so we gotta talk about ActRaiser. But it's just such a fun game, and it's so synonymous with the Super Nintendo. I really couldn't do a list of Super Nintendo games without mentioning ActRaiser at least once, but maybe you just missed this because it's an earlier title in the console's library, or maybe you're not as old as I am and you didn't grow up with the Super Nintendo and you just have never heard of ActRaiser, because sometimes the games I expect everyone to know about, nobody does, and the games I expect no one's going to know about, a lot of people do, so sometimes my guesses are not correct as well. But tell me down below, did you play ActRaiser back in the day? Have you played it in modern times, or have you never seen it before? I would be curious, and I will say it is a very difficult game. It's going to be punishing, but that punishment is going to be a ton of fun as well. It makes you learn what it needs, how to play it, and it makes you come back for more. Now on to the very obvious choice, but I gotta recommend it because it's one of my favorite games of all time, is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4: Turtles in Time. I know that Final Fight is the quintessential Super Nintendo beat 'em up, but this is basically second place right here. And I was a huge Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan back in the day. I had the birthday party theme, I had the bed sheets, I had the sleeping bag. If it involved turtles, you know I was going to be checking it out. And that is when I first learned of this game and played it, and I've been playing it ever since. And this is so much better of a game when you have friends over. If you just dock your Steam Deck, grab a few controllers, and start playing this, I guarantee you you're going to have a good time, or else y'all give you your money back. But considering you pay me nothing to watch this video, that money back guarantee remains a $0 investment. But it's just such a quintessential Super Nintendo game. I love it. It does everything perfectly, including the soundtrack. It is straight fire. So go ahead and listen to this one for 20 seconds and I'll come back and show you a few more games. I mean, how could you not love that soundtrack? It is a 10 out of 10 any day of the week in my book, and I love what this game does with the graphical effects of the Super Nintendo as well, with the sprite scaling here, as we throw members of the Foot Clan into the screen and hit Shredder with them. And of course it is Turtles in Time, so once you get past a certain point in the game, you're going to start traversing the history of the world with the Turtles, and I love Bebop and Rocksteady here in these pirate uniforms. It is hilarious, and of course it would be nothing if it didn't have some Mode 7 effects as well, and Turtles in Time does a great job of making it feel like Riding Fight from Taito. Deep cut arcade game, check it out if you haven't, but this isn't a Taito arcade recommendation video. It is a Super Nintendo video, and I am recommending everyone go out and play Turtles in Time. I'm sure most of you have played it, and if you have, then take this as a reminder to go back and play it one more time. Maybe it's been a year, maybe it's been 2 years, maybe it's been 5. It is as good as you remember it. It might even be better, so definitely check it out one more time. Now on the next recommendation, normally I would say Mega Man X, but I've been playing a lot of X2 recently, and I've been really enjoying my time with it. And since pretty much any time I show a Super Nintendo emulation tutorial or an FPGA comparison, I always pick X, so I figured it was time for X2 to shine, because it is a legit amazing Mega Man. You cannot go wrong with either of the X games on Super Nintendo, and pretty much through X4 they are good as well. As you get later on in the X series, they kind of diminish, which is a disappointment, but this is Capcom at the height of their abilities to make awesome 2D Mega Man games, and I know most of you have probably played X, but I'm assuming there's not as much traction for X2. But tell me down below, did you play it? Do you own it? Do you play it recently? I am curious about all of these things, but it's just platforming perfection. The controls are so tight and responsive. and it does so many amazing things with the hardware of the Super Nintendo. That is just a sprite back there, but if you think about it, it presents almost in full 3D. I understand it's not made of polygons, but the developers at Capcom and the artists had such a great handle on the Super Nintendo hardware at this point in time. It really is such a convincing look, and it just shines on the Steam Deck as well. On a handheld screen, this game looks incredible. And the stages are short enough that they are perfect for commute as well. And of course, you're going to get 8 robot masters and 8 different stages. And there's going to be so much versatility in this game for you. You can play one level, you can play another one, you can play for 10 minutes, you can play for an hour. It gives you so many different options. That's what I love about Mega Man. If you can play it for 10 minutes, you're going to get a great experience, but you can play for an hour as well. Just remember, don't be greedy like I am. I was going for that 1-up and I always die to it. And of course, I'm going to end up taking a swim in the lava again, which is to say Mega Man X2 is not an easy game. Now, it wouldn't be a video game esoterica video if I didn't try to convince you to play a Bomberman game. And there's not 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, but 5 Bomberman games on the Super Nintendo, and I'm recommending Super Bomberman 5. I almost went 4, but I've been flipping back and forth, and I actually did flip a coin, and 5 won. I just love Bomberman. I want more people to play it. This is the perfect party game with friends. And the great thing is, via emulation with the Steam Deck, you can have a ton of players playing versus real hardware. You have to have a lot of different controllers and wires going around. But nothing makes me happier than a Bomberman soundtrack, last soundtrack sample of the video, so go ahead and listen, and I'll be right back. That song, to me at least, is absolutely iconic. I'm going to be humming it for the rest of the day now that I heard about 30 seconds of it in my headphones as I do this voiceover. But if you're looking for one of the best party games on the Super Nintendo that you can play on your Steam Deck, just pick any of the Super Bomberman games. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. I can guarantee you that if you want to have fun with friends playing on the Steam Deck, you're going to have a great time playing Super Bomberman 5. But those are my picks for the Super Nintendo. I struggled with this video and I probably left off a lot of people's favorite games, so leave me a comment down below and tell me what you would have recommended had you been in my position, because paring this down to a 20-minute video is never easy. I'll be back next Saturday when we're at Steam Deck, and I'll have videos throughout the week as well, but we're done and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!